In just a moment, we'll get started. Just waiting for just a moment. Everybody's going to get on. We'll be starting in 1 minute. Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Shabbos edition. Good Shabbos. We'll have just a quick overview of this week's Torah reading and then a little bit of what we are talking about today. This week's Torah reading is actually one of the famous Torah readings because it's read many times on the second day of a holiday, as the Torah reading tells us all the different laws pertaining to the holidays. First, the Torah tells us about the people that Aaron and his children, Kohanim, for generations to come, are allowed to be impure to, which is almost nobody besides their own family. Aaron himself was not allowed to become impure only if he met somebody on the way and the person had nobody to bury them. Well, that was the only time a Kohen Gadol, a high priest, was allowed to become impure. And otherwise, other than their actual family, a Kohen was not allowed to become impure. This is one of the reasons why we find today even a Kohen, and in fact, many times they bury the family of the Kohen at the outside, on the outside line of the cemetery. So if the family wants to visit, they don't have to enter the cemetery to become impure when visiting the Kohen's family. The Torah then continues to go through the different holidays, starting with Shabbat, that Shabbat and the holidays have of equal value. And an interesting thing to note of why the Torah finds it necessary to tell us these is because there's something very different between Shabbat and the Jewish holidays that the people have. While Shabbat was a day that God decided on the seventh day of the week that we should rest as the holy day of Shabbos, however, when it came to the holidays, who determined what day is a holiday? That was determined by the Jewish people. The Jewish people, when they saw the new moon, it was the first of the month, counting 15 days later, then became the time when a holiday was celebrated. We see something unique that over here, God comes along to the Jewish people and says, you decide when the holiday is, and I will make it sanctified, and that becomes holy. As Shabbat and the holidays have of equal holiness. Yes, there are certain leniencies on a holiday which don't exist on Shabbat. For example, cooking for a holiday, one is allowed to on a holiday, but that is an exception to the rule because of the joyousness of the holiday. Another interesting thing that we find different between a holiday and Shabbat, there's an obligation of pleasure, while a holiday there's an obligation of joy. And ain't simcha ella bebasar v'yayin, the way one truly rejoices is with meat and wine, and therefore on the holidays there's an obligation to make sure that we drink wine not only for Kiddush but also for a joyous occasion. And the Torah enumerates the biblical holidays starting from Passover to Shavuos to Sukkot and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and telling us and enumerating the different holidays that the Jewish people have to observe. Three of those major holidays, which is Passover, Shavuos, and Sukkot, is when the Jewish people were meant to go to the Holy Temple for Oila Regala was called, that they went to come to the Holy Temple where they were then able to bring and where they then brought a sacrifice in honor of the holiday. Talking of holidays, which brings us into what we celebrate today. And today, as you know, is called Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni means the second Passover. Now, there's no second Sukkot. There's no second Shavuos. What does it mean that there's a second Passover? Why is there a second Passover? What does it mean there's a second Passover? And over here, just responding. And over here, the Torah tells us something very unique. When it came to every other holiday, if a person wasn't able to bring it on the first day of his holiday, the sacrifice, they had 7 days during that holiday to be able to bring the sacrifice. Shavuos, they also had 7 days after Shavuos to bring the holiday. However, when it came to the holiday of Passover, at that point, there was a month later that the Jewish people came along and they were able to bring the Passover holiday a month later after the holiday of Passover. Why is Passover a month later? Where did it come from? What is this Pesach Sheni all about? In fact, Pesach Sheni today is also observed by that we eat some matzah. So if you have any leftover matzah from Passover, today would be a good day to eat it in celebration of Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. So what is this Pesach Sheni all about? What is it telling us? What is it teaching us? What is it telling us? Pesach Sheni happened. What happened was, at the second time that the Jewish people celebrated Passover was a year later after they came out of Egypt. All of a sudden, there was a group of Jews who were impure. And they came along to Moses and said, Moses, it's not fair. Why should we be not allowed to bring a sacrifice? All the Jewish people are bringing a sacrifice. Everybody's bringing a sacrifice for the Passover offering. It is not fair that we should lose out. And Moses was dumbfounded. He didn't know what to do. So he came along and asked God, what should we do? And God said, therefore, those who have been impure or those who couldn't make it the first Passover, a month later on the 14th of Iyar, they get to bring a Passover offering. Now, why a month later? Why do they get to bring it? And over here, the Torah is telling us something very unique, a message which is pertinent to every single day. There's no minimum of how much matzah you should eat. Any amount is great enough. There's no requirement. It's a custom to be able to celebrate it. But why are we celebrating it? And over here, the message that God told the Jewish people then is a message that continues to resonate within every single Jew and with every fiber of our life. What does it mean? Pesach Sheni. And in the entire story of the Paschal offering of the second Pesach has such an important lesson for us. The first part of it is, who brought about Pesach Sheni? If you notice, it wasn't Moses came and told the Jewish people about the second Pesach. It was, in fact, the Jewish people themselves. Where were the Jewish people coming from? When we talk about Passover, it was something that the Jewish people were schlepped out of Egypt. They themselves maybe weren't worthy to come out of Egypt. It was only because God said, I want to take you out of Egypt and bring you to Mount Sinai. Were they ready? Maybe yes, maybe not. According to some, not at all. It took them 50 days until they got to Shavuos. So Pesach symbolizes God assisting us from above and moving us beyond. Pesach Sheni is a step further. Pesach Sheni tells us the Jewish people came along and said, Lama nigara, why should we lose out? The Jewish people had a demand, they required and asked, God, it's not fair. How come we don't get a chance? And over here, God comes along and says, you know what? You asked nicely, you'll get a chance a month later. Why a month later? Because it was an entire month for them to process, to reach that level that they can ask and demand and ask of God to be able to reach and attain a level of purity of bringing that Pesach. But over here, the Torah is telling us something, even a deeper message. Every single one of us in our own life has a right and an obligation to ask of God something. If we need something, ask. Don't think, well, God didn't give it to me. Who am I to ask? That's the opposite of Judaism, to demand. On the contrary, Pesach Sheni tells us, Lo manigara, why can we lose out? We want to be able to have that closeness to God. We have an obligation and a right to ask of God that we should have the coming of Mashiach, that we should be brought to the Holy Land and be able to bring that the Paschal offering. It's not against the Torah. It's something that we, the individual, have to ask for. Moses couldn't give it to us. Moses didn't know the answer. It was the Jewish people's own initiative that required the begging and asking of God, why should we lose out? And what does God come along and say? Yes, you can bring a second Paschal offering. Every person has the opportunity to come close. There is no such thing as spilled milk. There's no such thing, well, it's too late. Sorry, you missed the party. In fact, God comes along and says, no, we always have an opportunity. We have a chance, regardless of what happened yesterday, what happened 2 days ago. Every single day we have a chance to make it up. There's a second chance. God gives us a second chance. It's never too late. In the words of the previous Rebbe, he used to say, "Sinishtakim farfaln," it's never too late. Pesach Sheni tells us, just because yesterday I didn't have a chance, doesn't mean that today I don't have a chance. Just because yesterday I didn't demand for Mashiach means that today I got to ask for Mashiach. And when I ask and I ask and I ask enough, God will answer our prayers. Interesting thing, the Pesach Sheni had never had more of a meaningful message than in today's day and age. Unfortunately, there were many, many people who were not able to celebrate Pesach the way they really do. Some of them were hospitalized, some of them were intubated, whatever it may be. Pesach Sheni, all of a sudden they can celebrate Pesach that they missed out. There was a picture going around of Eli Beer, who was the founder of Hatzalah in Israel. He was in a coma during the first Pesach. Thank God he's feeling better and he's home. And he made a whole Seder today for Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni tells us it's never too late. God gives us a second chance. But God is asking, will you utilize that second chance? Will you take that second chance and run with it? Or are you just going to let it fall by the wayside? As in the Torah tells us, who were the people that were able to bring a sacrifice on Pesach Sheni? Those were the people who were impure, not by their own fault. Or the people that were very distant and couldn't make it to the Holy Temple, not because they did it intentionally, because they didn't know, they were too far, whatever it may be. God says you're never too far. You always have a chance to make it up. You always have a second chance. My dear friends, God, today, let's take the message of Pesach Sheni. The message of Pesach Sheni telling us we all have a second chance. The message of Pesach Sheni is telling us that God wants us to demand and wants us to ask and begs of us to request. Ask God to give you the blessings, and God will shower you with blessings. Ask God to bring about the great revelation of the coming of Mashiach. We do it every single day in our prayers. Don't be shy, God is telling us. Ask, and your requests will be answered. May God answer all our prayers even before we ask for them, and bring about the coming of Mashiach. And let us remember, we have that second chance. Let us use the opportunity to bring it to its best and utilize and bring that Pesach offering, and we will merit together to celebrate Pesach together in the Holy Land of Israel, Yerushalayim, with Mashiach now. Thank you for listening. I want to take this opportunity and wish you all a good Shabbos, a healthy Shabbos, a wonderful week, a prosperous week, and we very soon will get together and learn in person, talk in person, and celebrate together. Pesach Sheni, have a bite of matzah today. Enjoy, and remember, God's giving us a second chance. It's never too late. Give your friend a second chance as well. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to put it in the comment box. Okay, wishing you all have a good Shabbos. This will end our meeting for today. See you all next week on the other end.